the Confluence Fly Shop in Bend, Oregon. My name is Gabriel Juarez. Today we're going to be tying an articulated damsel fly nymph. If you're familiar with any of the high cascade lakes that we are blessed with in the area, you'll know that there are an abundance of damsels in pretty much every single one of them. And the fish definitely take advantage of eating the nymph's subsurface. They're typically a little easier to eat when they're not adults and flying around all over the place. So we're also going to incorporate that articulation point to help in movement. If you look at the naturals in the water, they have plenty of serpentine movements that definitely trigger fish. So let's take a look at what we're going to use to tie this fly today. Okay, so the hooks that we're going to be using today, the back hook is a Daiichi 1760 in a size 14. I like this one for kind of the main body because it's got a nice 2x long shank. And for the front hook, we're going to be using the Firehole 316. This is the Nymph Emerger hook. We can't forget about mono eyes for our damsel fly nymphs. I've got these from Hairline, and this is just a size small. We're going to be using 3X fluorocarbon for our articulation connection. This is pretty darn strong. It's 8.5 pound test. Luckily, the back hook will be cut, so there's not going to be any pressure on the connection. And so I find that this is thin enough but strong enough to work with this fly. All right, little flash going to be thrown in there. This is hollow tinsel and chartreuse. We're going to be using a size medium today for a 14 hook. Ostrich herl and olive. This stuff is awesome for any kind of still water pattern. There's lots of great movement and it just comes to life once it gets wet. For our legs, we are going to be using Hungarian partridge. This is olive. For our body, we're going to be using this awesome SLF squirrel blend from Wapsi. This stuff has got a bunch of different synthetics and natural materials kind of all mixed together. Lots of spiky guard hairs and just super buggy stuff. We're also going to use some vinyl rib for our body as well. This is a size midge. This stuff is pretty cool because it kind of offers a cool translucency to the fly, and it makes it look a little realistic. So, and then for kind of a wing case, this is going to be thin skin. And we're just using mottled oak as kind of the overall design here, but you can use whatever you want. I've got 70 ultra thread and olive loaded in the bobbin today. That's what we're going to be using. I'm going to start my thread just an eye length behind the eye. Enough wraps on there. Break the excess. We're going to make advanced wraps all the way back, right about the point of the hook. We're going to tie in our ostrich herl tail next. I've got 3 fibers that are relatively aligned by the tips there. I want this to be about a shank length. Once I get my measurement, I'll transfer, pinch those on the top, secure those in just like that. Once I've got those secure, I'll make wraps over top of the excess here, and then I'll fold these back and come about halfway. So those fibers are now really super locked into place. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tie in one more ostrich herl by the butt, and I'll bring that back to where my tail starts. We're going to save that guy for later. So next, I'll make advanced wraps up. We're going to tie in our flash next. I use a good 3 inches of flash here. Just don't want to run out. So I'll tie that in all the way back. I don't want to go past this other hurl here, so I'll stop right about there. Advance your thread back up again. We're gonna tie in our V-rib next. Again, for the V-rib, I like using about 3 inches or so. I'm gonna tie that in just like we tied our flash. Keep it nice and straight as you're making advanced wraps back. Once we get to our stopping point, bring that thread back up again to the eye. Alright, so next thing we're gonna do here is we're just gonna wrap this flash around the body. Tie that off, a couple wraps behind, a couple wraps in front. Trim the excess there. And so when we come in and wrap this V-rib, that flash will kind of show through the V-rib and it'll offer kind of a cool translucency to it. Alright, so I'm going to tie that off. Trim the excess. Alright, and last but not least, we haven't forgotten about this guy. We're going to make nice even wraps with this ostrich all the way up. We'll tie that guy off. Alright, so now we've got our back body portion done. You can come in here and just whip finish. Alright. I do like coming in here with a little bit of flow. Careful not to get any on that hurl. You can zap that. Alright, so take that out of the vise. You can put this fire hole stick in the vise now. Get our thread started. Again, a little bit behind the eye. Gonna lay down a nice little thread base for our mono eyes. Alright, so I'll just come in at an angle here and just make a couple of wraps to kind of just get this on the hook. And I want to eyeball these eyes, make sure that when I go to make my figure 8 wraps, those are nice and even on both sides. They're straight. Just take the time to make these eyes right before you lock them into place with some figure 8 wraps. Those puppies aren't going anywhere. Okay, so next thing we can do is we can tie in our 3X fluoro. And I like tying that in right behind those eyes. And I'll hold it as I make wraps down the hook. We don't want to go too far down here, because then we will impede the holding capabilities of this hook if we crowd that gap too much with material. So I'm only going to go about that far down. I'm going to take my back hook, thread that fluoro through the eye, come back on top with it, and I want this tiny little loop to be small enough to where this back hook isn't going to flop around and be too crazy and possibly, get fouled up with the front, but definitely, big enough to allow kind of maximum play here. So I like to go maybe about the size of the eye of the hook. So once I've got that tied in, I can make wraps forward. Once I get to this point here, I'm going to wrap that fluorocarbon back over itself and make wraps back down. I'm only going to go about halfway. We're kind of building subtle tapers here. So that's our articulation. Alright, so next thing I'm going to do here, guys, is we're going to tie in another hurl. We'll make wraps back right about where we ended there. And at this point, I'm going to build a little bit of a kind of tapered body with this SLF blend. And this, I don't like to tighten this noodle too much. We kind of want to take advantage of those spiky guard hairs. Just gonna leave a tiny little bit of space behind the eyes. Now, I can wrap this pearl around the body. Nice, even, tight wraps. Tie that off. I'm gonna tie in at this point this little bit of flash right on top of the hook. I'm gonna do the same thing with this thin skin. Next we're gonna tie in our legs. And so I've got this partridge, I've got all the fluff peeled away from the stem. The way I'm gonna prep this is I'm gonna pull away until I've got that tip exposed. And then we'll just trim a little nubbin. That's gonna be our tie-in point. So I'll come in at a little bit of an angle here, tie in my legs, and I'll sweep these back before I start wrapping them. Tie that off. Come in nice and close, trim that stem. You can trim out any fibers that didn't wrap properly. At this point, I'm gonna come in again with this SLF blend, and I'm just gonna make a nice, thin, a little bit longer noodle here. Sweep all these partridge fibers back. I'm just gonna make a couple wraps behind, and then I'm gonna make figure 8 wraps around those eyes with this dubbing, just to kind of finish the head. Alright, so now I'm gonna separate these partridge fibers to where I've got about an even amount on both sides, so that way when I pull this thin skin over, something like that. Tie this thin skin off. And I'm gonna come in really close, try to pull up a little bit, give it some pressure, that way when you come in it's a nice clean cut. And last but not least, we're gonna fold this tinsel over that thin skin, tie that off just the same. You can trim that. At this point, you can whip finish. Alright, so kind of take this wing case to the next level. I'm just going to put a little bit of thin over top. I'm being real diligent here as to not get anything on my materials. Alright, we can zap that. Okay, so I'm gonna leave this in the vise. I'll take a pair of wire cutters and we're gonna trim this back hook, but not too far into the shank. We don't want to compromise any of that material slipping off. So I'll leave a little nubbin left, clip it, and there's your articulated damsel fly nymph. Alright guys, well thanks for tuning in today. Hopefully this fly catches plenty of fish for you early season on our high Cascade lakes. If you have any questions about this fly or any other still water patterns that are working, come into the shop and we'll lend you a hand. You can find a link in the video to purchase all of the materials that we used to tie this fly today. We'll see you next time you come through the shop. Thanks again for watching.